We just want to get a sound check on Senator Heinz and Rep. Mark, if we could. Can
you hear me now?
You can. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I wonder if Paul's available. He might be. We'll give him a heartbeat to get situated. It's the technology has been the most interesting thing in the last couple of months. I can tell you that.
You need to sell Paul Mark a house with better internet and cell phone.
No, because we have the best advocate for us to understand some of these issues. He's taken up the baton, how important it is now more than ever, I think. So without further ado, I think we're going to get started. I just want to say thank you all for attending Realtor Day on Not Beacon Hill. This is a great way for us to connect every year with our legislators. We have such a wonderful Berkshire contingent. You're always open-minded, and we really always appreciate your support, your interest in our issues. And so this is great. We're going to try to just kind of run it like when we normally go to Beacon Hill on the bus at 6 a.m. and try to cram 20 people into your office and talk about some real estate issues that we think have an impact on the Berkshire County housing market. And appreciate that you can, converse, ask questions, have concerns. We just want to kind of go through our legislative agenda, which you got in advance a copy of, and we'll just kind of talk to you about how we think it'll impact in the Berkshires. And I would like to introduce first Eric Sternagel, who is on the call. This is our basic agenda. He is our 2020 president. He's been pressed into a different type of service this year, almost all online. And without further ado, I'd like him to introduce the legislative team that he put together for his year serving as president for the Berkshires. So Eric? Thank
you, Sandy. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I know it's been crazy for everyone, and again, thank you for all you do for everyone in the Commonwealth and especially in the Berkshires. So this year, I actually did something a little bit different than we normally do. I broke up our government affairs position into two spots. I kept Billy Keene as a government affairs committee chair, sitting for local issues in Berkshire County, and Tom Doyle for the MAR, Government Affairs Liaison, so he sits in my place. So I thank both of them for everything that they've been doing. Also, Franz Forrester and Ann Meswar are our state political coordinators. They're here to ask some questions as well. And thanks to Justin Davison from MAR. He's the Government Affairs Director and Chief Legal Counsel of MAR. Thanks, Justin, not only for this call, but for all the other calls you've been on with us. So thank you. So in, keeping time short and everyone's schedule, moving, we'll pass it right on. You're muted, Sandy.
I hate that. I have to get used to it. We just had a message come into that Paul Mark had to leave, sign back in, but it seems to be working now. So
it is working now. Hi, thanks everybody.
We said you're a great representative for how important broadband issues are to the Berkshires. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And now, without any further ado, we were actually going to ask our legislative team to introduce and just to give everybody here just a quick little rundown of our legislators and who we have here. So I'll start with Billy Keene, introducing Senator Heinz.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to have to go quick here. Obviously, I know we don't have a lot of time, and Adam's resume took up the entire RAM bandwidth of my computer. So in brief, Adam assumed office in 2017. He's in his second term. And he represents the largest geographic territory in the legislature. So 52 Western Mass communities, Berkshire, Hampshire, Franklin, and Hampden counties. Even though he's only in his second term, he's serving as the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee of Revenue, Vice Chair of the Senate Committee on Redistricting. He's also a member of the Committee on Ways and Means, obviously Senate Committee on Ways and Means, as well as several other policy committees. He's got more time in his day than anybody else that I know. We're just very blessed to have him back here. He grew up in Buckland, Mass. So Adam, he held various odd jobs over the years previous, such as being a team leader of a UN-led negotiation between Kurdistan region in the government of Iraq, various things like that. He was based in Jerusalem for a while as the regional advisor to the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process. All that stuff is behind him. He finally found himself and came back home, and now he represents us, advocating strongly for those of us in Western Massachusetts. We appreciate you, Adam. Thanks for being here today, and we hope we can keep this process smooth and efficient here for you guys so you can get back to all the many things you have to do.
Thanks for that, Billy.
No problem.
Next up, I'm going to go to, unfortunately, Representative Barrett couldn't be here with us this morning. I'm just going to do a quick double check that he's not on, and ask Tom Doyle to introduce Representative Paul Mark.
Thanks, Sandy. Good morning, everyone. Representative Paul Mark was first elected to the House Chamber in 2010. In addition to his undergraduate degree in economics, he holds master's degrees from both the University of Massachusetts and Northeastern University. And on top of all that, he has a law degree from Suffolk University, and he has real life working experience as an attorney. Currently, he, according to the notes that I was able to glean from the internet, he is chair of the redistricting committee in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Possibly known more recently, though, as the poster person legislator for working remotely without ready access to a broadband connection in his constituent region. So I don't know where Representative Paul is this morning, roaming about for his connection, but welcome and thank you for your time and support.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm usually in the car doing these things, which is why I never have any video. And I'm gonna say the snootiest thing I've ever said in my life. My degree from Northeastern is actually a doctoral degree.
Oh. Well.
But thank you so much for the great introduction.
Thanks so much. And now, Anne, our friend Tricia Farley Bouvier, please.
I am really pleased to introduce Tricia, and I don't think there's anybody in Berkshire County who doesn't know her. Tricia, of course, is state legislator with the House of Representatives, representing the 3rd Berkshire District, which is almost all of Pittsfield, except for little tiny parts that are outside of her district. She is an absolute workhorse for Berkshire County. She came in under a special election in 2011, ran unopposed a couple of times, beat off challengers since then, with good reason. This is somebody who's an absolute advocate for the people of Berkshire County. Her background as a teacher definitely comes to the forefront because this is a person who is a strong advocate for education, for transportation in Berkshire County, for broadband, thankfully. And as of late, I think her biggest claim to fame, especially during this COVID crisis, is keeping us all so well informed with daily updates about what was happening with COVID in Berkshire County, how the numbers were shaking out, what kind of legislation was coming out. Just really did an awesome job keeping informed. We don't always agree on issues, and that's actually the best thing about Tricia, because she will sit directly across from a table for you and even listen to you. It will be direct eye contact. She will lean in. She wants to hear those facts. So that's why something like this is so important. She's one of those people who really, really takes to heart what constituents have to say and is very respectful of it. And that's why I'm very pleased to be her state political coordinator.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome. And Franz Forrester is going to introduce Representative Smitty Pignatelli.
Hi, and I'll try to keep this fairly brief. Smitty Pignatelli represents the 4th Berkshire District. As we probably know, he's currently serving in his 8th term. And my experience has been that he works tirelessly for his constituents and has demonstrated a particular sensitivity to issues affecting homeowners and realtors. I noticed that he recently took a firm stand in favor of plans for expanded east-west rail service, which must include the Berkshires, and that he currently chairs the what we in the Berkshires consider to be vitally important joint committee on environment, natural resources, and agriculture. As an aside, for those of you who don't know, Smitty also is known for a firm, and some might even say bone crusher of a handshake. And that's all I have to say right now. Welcome.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you very much, Franz. Just two things. I'm in my 9th term, but if we're going to talk about rail, please say it's west-east,
Okay.
Like
not east-west. If we start in the west, I promise you we'll get to Boston. If we start in the east, I won't live long enough to see it in the Berkshires.
Amazing point. That's a great point. Absolutely. So thank you all for being here. We're going to start with just a quick housing overview. We had just sent out a report to our members, but we just want to kind of kick the conversation off just with a brief kind of understanding of where our Berkshire housing is through this COVID situation, just so you have an understanding. All right, let me swipe the slides. So what we're looking at is, so our first quarter ended strong in sales, one of our strongest first quarters on record going into the COVID crisis. So obviously quarantine sales fell flat. We fell about 30% in the last 2 months, which is quite understandable, quite expected. One of the interesting parts about our statistics, when you look at them, our inventory is still significantly down. Active listing count as of May of this year was 627 countywide. That's compared to last year of 925. So we're down over 30% in inventory. So there's a huge amount of demand that's been built up in the last 2 months and just not the homes on the market. And we're expecting some of that's going to improve as we start reopening the state in the next few phases, but it is a significant issue right now. And last year when we were looking at our inventory, we were saying that was too low to satisfy demand, especially in what we call the workforce housing range, which is between $150,000 and $250,000. Countywide is clearly the most popular price range that we have for sales, for home sales. What we're seeing is obviously some flourishes in some of our higher end markets. One of the most encouraging things is when you look at the pending sales. Our pending sales are already up 30% compared to last year at the same time. So we know that we are recovering. We know we're kind of coming out of this. The dollar volume of those sales is up 40%. So we can see that prices are rising in response to this demand. And there is, if you talk to any realtor, I encourage you to do so because they have amazing stories. I think some of the market is as it normally is. You know, you list a home, it's going to sell in a reasonable amount of time. Other markets are so hot, we're kind of changing the way we even do business to a certain extent because we know in the first few days there can be 20 showings and multiple offers, which is very unusual at the speed of which this is moving. So we just kind of wanted to give you that perspective. Go ahead.
So you're confirming this, what I've basically heard anecdotally from folks, including a few people on this call. But so just to be clear, you're essentially saying fewer houses are on the market, but more houses are being sold than last year.
Correct. Right. The demand is very high for the houses. And part of that is we start to see some of the demand is moving out of our typical price range. So, you know, we are selling more of our more expensive inventory that sat on the market for years.
Okay.
Yep. And we can send you the full report that we have. It's also available on our website that really drills down. Here's another statistic. This is all about pendings, just so that you can see when you look at current year versus prior years, and you can kind of see how what we're looking at kind of going into June. You see the big spike in May, but also the last 2 months weren't significantly off after kind of a year of, you know, increasing sales. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit. And then we had our Massachusetts Association of Realtors, Justin is on the call, but they had a really wonderful session yesterday, and they had a national economist come in, and I actually swiped a few of her slides that I thought were very interesting, because we always talk about how is our population impacted with first-time buyers, but how is our population sustaining this housing market that just keeps booming? And we know some of it is people coming in from outside of the area, especially now with effects of COVID. There's a different desire for being not in a metropolitan area, coming in from Boston, coming in from New York, we see it. But also when we look at kind of, we've had big fluctuations of solo buyers, which is the changing family dynamic and why we have a need for more housing. And so they're starting to say, geez, are buyers stopping? Is that going to slow down a little bit? People are actually, you can see, having multi-generational homes on an increasing level. So it's just things to think about. And then this COVID is changing really how people want to look for different space. And so again, we already see market differences in people wanting to stay away from urban centers. And we're not talking downtown Pittsfield, we're talking Boston and New York City. And that they're changing what's happening in their home. Obviously, people need home offices. They're trying to have more people in different places. You know, before it used to be big open space in your home. Now people are trying to get, you know, space, private space and things like that. And a lot of people are spending their time and their money on their homes. So those are just some housing trends that we're looking at. We're happy to send you the report in detail, but just to give you a bigger perspective of kind of what we're looking at. We're hopeful going in, but we also know that this inventory issue is going to be significant down the road.
Yeah, Sandy, if you could send us that, that'd be very helpful.
Yep, I will do that today. And then I'm going to kick it off, and we might as well get right into the issues. And this is one we talked to you about last year. I'm going to have Billy Keene just kind of, you know, give us a little brief overview. Some of the people who are on and attending haven't heard about the Housing Choices Act yet. So, Billy, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, we'll jump in. And again, I'm not going to like read off the slides here and bore everybody to death this morning. But what I'm hoping is we'll give a brief overview, and then for those of you on the panel, if you want to bring some of your opinions into the conversation or perhaps your current thoughts on the bills, that's helpful, and it's also encouraged. We'd love to talk to you about it. In very concise terms, what this housing choice bill does is it reduces the need for a supermajority, a 2/3 vote in municipal zoning votes down to a simple majority. But it only does that for certain zoning changes. Okay, this isn't like an across the board, you only need a simple majority to change all things. This is specifically related to smart growth zoning changes. Some examples would be putting together housing. It's really about development. It's bringing new housing into our communities, which is desperately needed, as you can tell. Creating housing in a more dense way near transportation centers, for instance. Creating more housing, in a dense way near open space recreational areas. So now we're both conserving recreational lands while creating affordable housing. This also allows us, I mean, it's smart growth in general. I would add that I believe Massachusetts is only one of maybe 9 states left in the union that requires a supermajority for a lot of these changes. So it's not like we're recreating the wheel here. Indeed, we're simply trying to stay in line with our current needs. So again, that's housing production. These are zoning changes related specifically to people's ability to find suitable housing that's affordable in places that are, say, walkable, less restrictive to our use of other recreational lands, these kinds of things. This bill really does make a difference. It's a concrete way to make a difference, in fact. And we'd really hope to see some support on this. We did talk about it last year. If I recall some of the conversations that we had, you know, some of you were a bit hesitant about this. I think one of the concerns was the fact that, you know, on the very surface, it might appear as if we're taking some of the power out of the hands of the voters. It's really not the case. It's not like we're saying, you know, let's put a factory inside this suburban neighborhood. You know, when people hear zoning changes, sometimes we think absolute worst case scenarios. This whole bill is purely and specifically related to housing production, the creation of sustainable housing practices, smart growth, and affordability. So,
if I may, too, I mean, you hit on an important point where it was that people were concerned that this was taking away control from the local voters. And it's actually the exact opposite. It's putting it in the hands of the majority instead of a vocal minority who can throw it off tracks. And we definitely saw that happen in Lenox a couple of years ago when we were trying to get through a really great affordable affordable housing project that was derailed. The majority voted for it, but it was derailed because it wasn't a supermajority. That's not observing the will of the voters at all.
You're absolutely right, Ann. I appreciate you bringing up that specific Berkshires related example, because these are the types of things that can really showcase the importance of this type of legislation and how it can directly impact a community, and the protection of private property rights and these types of things. Very important. I believe currently it's sitting with the House Committee, the Ways and Means Committee. I think John Barrett's on that committee actually, but I don't think he's with us today. But hopefully we can encourage the furthering of that bill. Well, that was like rapid fire. Did I just go, was that too much, too fast? I'm not really sure. I'm still trying to gauge the Zoom thing. I mean, normally when there's 30 of us right in front of your desks, it's easy to tell what kind of impact we're having, but this is a bit more challenging. Does anybody want?
If you don't mind, I'll jump in here if that's okay, Billy.
I'd love it. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you that I was a hard sell on this one, because when it was rolled out, it was really rolled out for the eastern part of the state. To me, that's how, came across to me. And I was concerned that, special interests would come in. To be honest, Pittsfield has a history of special interest groups coming in and producing some housing that wasn't up to snuff. For example, there's a history of creating what they were called private roads, right? And so private roads are just a terrible idea because it never works out in the end. And but the more I learned about it, and the more I saw, local impacts of not being able to have the 50% majority, the simple majority, the more I understood it. So, I really appreciate the fact that I can count on you as community partners for me to better understand this issue and to better understand how it can have positive local impacts. Even here, in fact, I think it was written, quite frankly, for the Somervilles of the world, but I think it has positive impacts here in the Berkshires too.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I think, Tricia, that showcases something really important here that's not related to this at all, but it's the fact that you are so open-minded as to be willing to read, educate yourself, educate others, and then indeed perhaps change opinions. What an amazing thing in 2020 for people to be able to take in all the information available and make smart, educated, knowledgeable decisions. And you're kind of like a guiding light for that. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Maybe I'll just add real quickly that it feels like the conversation has been that people recognize there's a need for development, for housing development. When you talk about the dampener in the Boston area, it's typically transportation and congestion and housing prices. And so there's a recognition that we really need to invest in both to expand the supply. And then I think the same goes here, is that it feels like there's a conversation about, okay, fine, let's enhance that. And I think that does make sense, quite honestly. But then let's also be very clear about affordability. And so kind of having that element in, and that's why you have this pretty robust conversation on other items that I see in the do not support column for you on your side. But there's a lot of people trying to talk about how do we make sure there's funding available for affordable housing. And so that's why I feel like this whole conversation has kind of matured in the last year, and people are finally rolling up their sleeves a bit, derailed obviously by the bandwidth capacity around COVID, but it just feels like a much more robust conversation now than it did when it first came out.
That's a great point, Adam. And indeed, to add to the robustness of the conversation, we've actually got a lot of the parts that make the whole. Let's take Pittsfield specific, okay? We've got developers in the area that are really encouraging the development of smart growth type environments. So you're talking about maybe apartments in commercial centers that include 10% affordability housing rates. You're talking about the transportation issues, which Adam, you've been so diligently working on with our transit center here. We're talking about housing near those areas that have been developed. And there's developers ready to do that. There's money there to do that. There's people that need it. I mean, every single day, literally, I have businesses calling my office talking about their employees that need housing. There's folks who unfortunately can't afford even the lowest price housing in our city, which, by the way, is kind of crumbling and needs to be rejuvenated. So we've got those parts. Now what we're asking is our government and municipalities to put that third part into place, which is not a blanket sweep yes to every question. It's an opportunity, right? It's a door that's now been slightly ajar that we can either push through if we want to as a community, or we can allow to stay shut if that's what we choose is best. But the idea here is to reduce the barriers that are currently blocking our ability to put those pieces together to create a more sound, sustainable, economic, and of course, housing-related future. Robust, indeed. I shouldn't have had those 3 cups of coffee, guys. I'm sorry about that. All right, Raft. This one is great. I mean, I think we might as well dive into something that seems to us to be kind of a no-brainer. The past few months have been extremely challenging for everybody, specifically folks who are already in a disadvantaged economic state. I truly, the empathy that I know we all feel, and perhaps some of us are even dealing with it, for folks who maybe can't even afford rent anymore or utility bills. It's an unprecedented challenge. So we wholeheartely support a RAFT expansion. This is the Residential Assistance for Families in Transition program. It does lots of things, including moving cost assistance, helps with utility bills, helps with rent payments. Again, we're not just giving away money to anybody that asks for it. There's a fairly rigorous application process that goes along with this. But the RAFT expansion allows several things. First of all, obviously, it's new RAFT funding, $50 million. It also increased the amounts of the grants that folks can apply for up to $10,000. It would allow multiple grants per the year, the 12-month period. So, obviously, there's a lot of transition happening now, and potentially some people may need more than one helping hand. Indeed, this also expands the access. So there's still rigorous requirements that people need to adhere to here, but this would allow the permitting eligibility. I believe it's up to, our slide is kind of cut off, but if I recall correctly, it's up to 80% of the median income range in a certain area. Again, if I'm recalling correctly, but suffice to say, we wholeheartedly support this. And unless we have something to, oh, go ahead, Tricia.
Yeah, Billy, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here. Just know that I'm a very active member, as a matter of fact, co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, and this has come for the first time, quite frankly, as one of the top priorities of the Progressive Caucus. We tend to choose about 3 priorities, and so in the budget this year, RAF funding is something we have decided to really take on. We have this amazing partner in Brad Gordon when it comes to housing and housing security. He does an amazing job in the Berkshires with this, and we know it is much less expensive to keep people housed than to try to rehouse them. Led by the House, we did a great job in keeping people housed during the COVID crisis, as far as having the eviction moratorium, but that didn't mean we said you didn't have to pay your rent, right? And so the bill is coming due, and we really are encouraging people to pay what they can so that that bill isn't too big when they come. But the last thing we want to do is come August, September, now nobody, we have all these new evictions. So as much as we want to protect our tenants, we have a good number. Most of our landlords here are low-income landlords, and these are business people in our community, and we don't want to put them under the gun. And so RAF funding really helps our whole economy, keeping people housed, making sure our local landlords have a stable business model, right, and keeping those funds within our community.
And if I could just quickly add to that, to Tricia's, we established a $5 million fund to prevent homelessness due to the COVID. So I think we've historically recognized the importance of RAFT, and it was one of the very first things that was established was the RAFT relief fund for $5 million. Probably not going to be enough, but it just shows an indication from the legislature that we take it seriously.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Obviously, it works, and that's why we support the expansion of it. And we're taking note of the fact that you guys are at the helm of these things. It's really important stuff. And as you mentioned, just to reiterate, this is a whole economic system. It's not just renters. It's not just landlords. These things really are tied together, and these programs assist in all of that. Thank you for contributing. Another teed up easy layup here is the first-time homebuyer savings accounts. These are so crucial. My personal brokerage represents buyers in all kinds of price ranges, but we also specialize in first-time homebuyers. A lot of folks do. And I got to tell you, these folks do not have it easy. There are very few homes out there. What is out there, the prices are being inflated in some cases drastically. I mean, we're talking about like 20% up from a few years ago. I mean, really, really big price inflations due to the fact that there's just such a low inventory. So how, we've got great loan programs for first-time home buyers with fairly low down payments, but still it's quite a challenge. So what this allows people to do, not just the individuals buying, by the way, but also their families can contribute up to $5,000 annually into a first-time home buyer savings account. And it's, you can use it as a deduction, basically. Tax write-off. The gains that they're making on these savings accounts are exempt. You can continue this program for up to 15 years, $50,000. It's a beautiful thing. I don't think I probably don't need to dive too deep into this one because I think it makes a lot of sense right off the bat. Unless somebody wants to add, in which case we're happy to indulge that.
I personally think, Billy, is a great idea. I would fully support it. I think the town of Lenox has a really terrific program for first-time home buyers. I think other communities could and should do the same kind of thing. The fact that, a 20% down payment when the homes are $200,000, $300,000 or $400,000, that's a lot of money. I bought my first home when I was 19 years old, and a $20,000 down payment, a 20% down payment was about $8,000. A lot of money back then, but in perspective, that's a heck of a lot more money today. And I think the towns have done a good job. I mean, Lenox has done a good job. I think other towns should do the same. This savings account is a fabulous idea, and I hope it does get some traction.
Thank you, and you're absolutely right. Lenox does a fantastic job of there's some first-time homebuyer grants for down payments. There's some amazing things happening there. And I agree with you, Smitty, that should be a model that other communities can follow. And of course, as we all know, if people are putting money into a savings account, it ain't contributing economically necessarily. So what this does is it encourages that savings to be put into an account that will be spent, right, into our economic cycle. So it's not just putting it away, which is not great for our system as a whole. It's putting it away with the distinct and, well, frankly, the necessary intention of spending it on housing in the future. So,
and probably the single biggest investment anybody's going to be making is investment in a home. I think that's money wisely spent.
We agree with you. Thank you so much for bringing up that point.
And we should give a shout out to, this was reported favorably from the Revenue Committee, which is chaired by Senator Heinz. So thank you for that support. And it's now currently before the Ways and Means. And so it is progressing. So we're fingers crossed hoping that this could happen in this legislative cycle. So thank you for all of your support. Makes a big difference. And we were really proud to be able to support the Lenox Fund in one of our charitable outreaches. So I think we can help raise this boat for everybody. So next up.
All right. Perfect extensions. I'm just going to go ahead and let Mr. Tom Doyle chat about this one. You probably heard enough of me for the time being. And this is, Tom really spearheaded a lot of this.
Yes, good morning. So this is a critical issue. Full disclosure, I personally have a project, a development pending down in Great Barrington. Senator Heinz and Smitty has heard repeatedly about this. And, it's like the perfect storm. Here we go. Just survived all the challenges, planning board level, select board level, pull the building permits in late January, and COVID hits. Very difficult to get contractors to pin down construction costs. that will be acceptable to a bank lending institution. And I am told that some of the key construction material components have increased 60% in price, given the tariffs of the last couple of years. So it really is a very difficult environment now in terms of getting firm pricing, getting people booked. Jobs are, being rushed forward if they can. Other jobs are being pulled back and not happening. So there's a lot of dislocation going on. Back in 2010, after the financial recession from 2008, the legislature passed permit extension legislation extending permits that were on the books for 2 years. And again, it was done according to our legal counsel in 2012 for an additional 2 years. So, this is COVID impact just as it's a global thing, obviously. And I just think that such legislation is incredibly needed now, even more so than it was back then. Certain areas like Boston and New York bounced back. The Berkshires didn't. We're just now worked off our inventory, and housing more than ever is needed in this region. So hopefully everybody on the in the representatives and the Senate on the Hill can get to this very quickly, because people need to have certainty in order to be able to plan and fund with financing. Thank you.
May I ask a question? Is this a bill, or is it part of a bigger bill or something?
Justin Davidson might chime in here and give us the briefing on. Mar has been working with the secretary. I don't know if I have the name right, Keneally, on putting something forth in conjunction with the governor. Justin, can you comment?
Yeah, we're working to have this included in any economic recovery package that comes before the legislature. So it's really, this was trying to flag it for you all so that hopefully when you see it in a bill, you'll understand the type of impact that it would have. So no bill number yet, but we're working on it.
Would it be limited to housing projects or other construction projects?
We're focused on the housing components. I imagine other people would be interested in other construction projects, and it would be limited in scope to a time period surrounding the COVID crisis.
Thanks.
I'd just say real quickly, and you're right, Tom, it's thanks for bringing this up early and often, as you point out, but it's that we tried to include it in a municipal bill. And so basically because of the state of emergency, permits had been extended across the state for 90 days until after the state of emergency. But it's true that I think a more robust kind of approach that you described is probably what's needed, especially given the overall dynamics in the market that already existed pre-COVID for construction costs. I think the good news is on the Senate side, when it comes to the economic development bill, we just had a hearing Friday on essentially reopening and reinvestment and recovery, and we're probably going to be essentially. You should see progress on this in July. Our session ends, as you all know, at the end of July. On the books, there's some talk about should we extend into the fall, or is it just to take up one or two issues here and there if we do reopen in the fall. But I would put this pretty clearly in the category of stuff that we know we need to do soon, and that the co-chairs of economic development and emerging technologies are seized of this right now for sure.
That's a great update. Thank you, Senator. Back to you, I guess, Billy, unless there's another legislative comment.
All right, I guess we can keep on trucking. Thanks, Tom.
Before we move on, Billy, just really quick, Barb Hassan had made a comment that it would make sense to add commercial projects to this as well, especially since this permitting takes so much longer than for housing. So that's just a comment from one of our Realtor members. And now we can move on.
All right.
Sandy, if I can just add to that, I think that would be really important. And I would just kind of throw back to Justin as they're trying to craft this piece of legislation. I would think more broadly that this COVID has changed so much. And I think the Berkshires, unlike previous downturns in the economy, I think the Berkshires are poised to bounce back quicker than Boston just because of our natural social distancing opportunities. So I think Barb is right. I think we should think seriously as legislation is being crafted, not just keep it for residential, but for all large projects or all projects entirely.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that insight. So, transfer taxes.
Yeah, let's
Boo,
jump.
hiss, go Billy.
I was hoping we talk about Greenworks climate resiliency first, but I'll go into transfer taxes because that's the slide we got. I mean, okay, beautiful. I'm just trying to keep up with you here. Oh my gosh. So here's the thing. I'm really excited about this for a couple of reasons. First of all, I love being on the pro side of green energy bills in general, as we all do. It's such an important time in our world to really be behind these things. The Greenworks Climate Resiliency Bill, it already unanimously passed the House last year, I believe. Frankly, it's the basics are it provides tech assistance to municipalities to develop microgrid electrical systems, which is a wonderful ability for community to support itself in that way. It encourages electrification of transit authority vehicle fleets. It can encourage the hiring of sustainability coordinators for municipalities. So you have like the central hub who can help you create these new eco-friendly mechanisms for government. Here's the kicker though, right? It's funded by $1.25 billion in bonding. In other words, it's distributing that cost across the entire state through the bonding system so that we all end up paying back the necessary cost to do this. What it doesn't do is it doesn't burden 2.5% of our citizenry who happen to be buying or selling homes with a transfer tax to pay for it. And now you see why I wanted to start with this. You can't take frankly, a global initiative, right? Obviously, we're talking state. You can't take a general initiative like this and burden a tiny fraction of our population with the cost, particularly when that cost is derived from a fluctuating business cycle. I mean, home buying and home selling should be, obviously, we need to contribute to that economic system, but we can't rely on it for the payment of a transfer tax to support, for instance, a climate resiliency bill. So we think that this has been developed in a really great way. The effects of this will be profound and huge and will continue as a positive green trend into the future, and it won't be based on transfer tax, which we vehemently oppose and which we've talked about many, many times. So does anybody want to jump in on this before we, actually, I suppose I could dive into mandatory energy audits as well. Again, I mean, we've done this in your offices. We've done this at cocktail parties. Wherever we see each other, we've done this. We cannot have mandatory energy audits on our housing stock. It's just absolutely the wrong way to go about encouraging eco-friendly building practices or home renovation practices. Most of our housing stock is older, guys. We know this. Maybe you yourselves live in older housing. Maybe your parents, maybe your grandparents. The fact is that in the Berkshires or in Western Mass in general, the vast majority of our housing stock was built before even 1978, which is the timeline we typically have for lead paint usage. But it's older homes. And frankly, older homes just are not going to have whatever these economic parameters that we've kind of set up, or environmental parameters that we've set up. They're not going to meet those requirements. They just won't. And if you imply that the value of the home is based in this, which is what an energy audit would do, then you're directly reducing the value or stigmatizing those homes in particular, which aren't, tipping the arrow, so to speak, in the direction of our energy scale. And frankly, the scales are, in some cases, they're kind of arbitrary. Like, what do when we've looked at what the scale is for energy use or eco-friendly building practices. It's all over the place. It doesn't even seem to be based in the realities of what a home is, especially not in this area. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here, so to speak, but that's where we stand. So again, we oppose mandatory energy audits, we oppose transfer taxes, but I like to counterpoint that with our strong support of the Greenworks Climate Resiliency Bill, which again, it's already unanimously passed in the House. So I guess I'm really talking to you, Senator Heinz, whenever it comes around your desk here. And I imagine that we'd have your support on this because I know how important green energy and sustainability is to you.
Well, let me just clarify a couple things, Billy, in advance of Adam. This was a speaker's priority piece of legislation when we started the two-year session last year. It was passed unanimously. It was sent to the Senate back last July. The Senate did a very different climate bill. And unfortunately, I don't know where the two are aligned, if they're aligned at all. My big fear right now as we talk here in the middle of June is, I think Adam alluded to it earlier, we're supposed to be done with our legislative work in the second year of the session by the end of July. There has been some talks about extending it, but I think it's a big miss if we do not address or have a serious climate bill on the governor's desk before we adjourn before the end of July. I'm just worried we're running out of time. The COVID has shifted everybody's focus. The recent situation with police and the Black Lives Matter the last couple of weeks have shifted everybody's focus. We also have to keep in mind that the state is anticipating lost revenue to the tune of $5 to $6 billion. So I think we're all waiting to see if, when, and how much a federal stimulus program would look like to know where these dollars will land in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But I will echo your sentiments about the Greenworks climate bill. It would be a real miss if we adjourn and no climate bill is done this year. And we've seen in Pittsfield about, a simple 10% cut in local aid, 140 teachers going to be laid off. We've got to work on those things as well. We're 2 weeks from the start of the fiscal year. We do not have a fiscal 21 budget in place just yet. We're probably going to be working on 1/12 budgets on top of it all. So there's a lot of competing interests. There's a lot of push and pull with about 6 weeks to go in the legislative cycle. So a lot of work to do, and I hope that we can all get our heads together, House and Senate, to do some real priority pieces, such as Greenworks, housing choice, and some of these other things we talked about.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you so much, Smitty. You guys have a lot on your plates, but I really appreciate your advocacy for these things. And as you said, there's a lot of important things coming up, but that doesn't diminish the importance of the bills that had already been here. And what I'm hoping with this one is let's just not overcomplicate it. You guys did a great job in the House. It's here. We support it. Let's make it happen. And I think that we're all taking note of how vehemently you advocate for these things that we also support. So thanks again for reiterating.
And then if I could just quickly add, Billy, what's made it difficult is that, many of us have not been to Boston in 9 or 10 weeks.
Sure.
We are doing formal sessions remotely because of our inability to get 160 state reps in one room at a given time. We're doing these conference calls. Makes it very challenging. Last week we had a 2-day formal session. The second day was 7.5 hours, sitting at our desk in our living room or wherever, trying to understand and not having the ability to talk to our colleagues who sit next to us or go to a different division. I can go from Division 1 to Division 3 to talk to Tricia or Paul Mark. That inability has made it very challenging, and that's why some of these larger, more comprehensive and complicated bills are even more difficult to legitimately have a conversation through a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm. Sure. You're facing the challenges. I think it also just further, it deepens our appreciation for the time that you guys have taken today to sit with us. We certainly, those marathon Zoom sessions that that you folks are doing on behalf of all of us don't go unnoticed, and we truly do appreciate all the work you're putting in, and especially the time you're taking to hear us out, because, you know, frankly, we don't want to become siloed, right? When we're all sitting in our homes, you guys have to continue to have, well, we like to think that the input from folks like us and our 25,000 members of NAR, we can provide hopefully some insights as well. So that though you might be, you know, barricaded in your office or your living room for 7 hours, you'll still have the input, so that you're not kind of left alone on an iceberg floating around. We really appreciate your advocacy, and your endurance. My God.
And two, just to follow up with that, if there's anything that we can do to kind of make your process easier, or if there's any advocacy that you see needing to happen, you know, we would be happy to take a look at the issues and get our support systems going if need be. So just always keep us in mind for that as well. And actually, I'm just going to throw out, if we feel like we probably touched on all of our issues. Do you feel comfortable, Billy?
I feel great. Yeah, I mean, you know me, I could go on for days and days, but that's
well, we just want to make sure, and we want to make sure our legislators have a chance to talk as well. So I just want to ask if there are any other questions from either the panelists or attendees on the call, or, you know, we would be happy to take questions from obviously our legislative delegation, but just before we kind of move on, what we'd like to do is just to give everybody here an opportunity from our delegation and a chance to talk to us too about anything that you're working on that you'd like us to know about. That we have, I think, about 31, 32 people on the call now, just to share kind of your message, because I think it's important now. We've been seeing and hearing a lot more from all of our legislators now more than ever, and it's so appreciative to have that leadership. So
I'm going to take the opportunity. I had said at the beginning of the call that I have an unexpected conflict starting at 10 o'clock. So if my colleagues don't mind me jumping in at this time, I'm always looking to all of you as community partners. You help me understand issues that you specialize in, and I really appreciate that. And as we all work to support our community at large, which that's what I've really learned from all of you, is how much you support the community. It's not just that you care about making this sale or that sale. You know, we are in the most difficult fiscal crisis of our lifetime. And if we don't take real action now, we are going to dig ourselves deeper into a hole. And there are many who feel like the only choice that we have is to just make one cut after another cut so that we can balance our budgets. And I reject that notion. And I think that we need to invest our way out of this, you know, the financial crisis that has come as a result of our health crisis. We have a rainy day fund that is robust. It's now has at about $3.5 billion. That is a result of a long time of careful stewardship of the taxpayer dollar. We need to be bold in using that rainy day fund at this time. And I mean, I have an op-ed that was actually published this morning in the Eagle. I'm calling, you know, I think we need to be using at least $1.5 billion of those dollars. I think we need to, all of us, each one of us, there are 31 of us on this call now. And so I really believe that within the next half hour, Congressman Neal, Senator Warren, and Senator Markey should each be getting 31 calls in the next hour or so, demanding that they take action now on the next federal relief bill, and that this federal relief bill needs to be focused on our state, on state relief, so that we can get money into the hands of our cities and towns in a timely way. As been mentioned before, Pittsfield has laid off or sent out what they call RIF notices to 140 educators. That is absolutely unacceptable. I think that we have to be looking at closing the tax loopholes that were created to protect the wealthy. And there are ways that we can do that that do not impact the working and middle class. And if needed, we need to borrow. Now that is a crazy notion that you borrow for operating expenses, but we have to consider it this time because we are in extraordinary circumstances. So, Chapter 70 is how the main way we support our schools. This is particularly true in a place like Pittsfield, North Adams, Lee, and it is not okay that we make drastic cuts in Chapter 70. In particular, that's my number one focus is protecting Chapter 70, and with people like you who care about the community, but you also care in particular about home sale prices. We know that good schools is a major consideration about people moving into a community. So I hope that each and every one of you will join us in fighting for a budget that is fair and supports our community. And, we have to be bold. And if it means closing those tax loophole, voting for a tax increase isn't something that people do lightly. And sometimes it's really, really unpopular with people, but it's not nearly as bad a choice as laying off 140 teachers.
Thank you so much, Tricia. Really appreciate your comments and appreciate your time here today and all of the updates you've been giving. So it's been a way for us to keep informed and to keep our fingers on the pulse. So very much appreciated. Anything for Tricia before we? All right, who's up next? Do you want to hanker among yourselves, or do you want me to go in order? Senator Heinz, you're the next on the list, and if you'd like to lead the way.
Sure. Thanks again for convening this. And sorry we can't be doing this in the State House. To Smitty's point, in an hour, I'll be doing our version of probably a 5 or 6 hour remote voting session on how we're going to do voting this fall. It's hard not to be really beat down by what we've experienced in 2020. And yet, Sandy, you alluded to something that really has me hopeful for the possibility that we come out stronger on the other side of this, and the other side might be 2, 3, 4 years. But to see an acceleration in several trends that I think were happening anyway, well, maybe not all of them, but to see an acceleration in remote working, I think is a good thing for the Berkshires, to the extent that we can have people making a New York City or a Boston salary and doing it from their home in the Berkshires is a real dynamic that we need to capitalize on. The fact that we've seen, and this is maybe a new trend, a de-urbanization as a result of this because of concerns that people have had around proximity with others, I think is a good thing for the Berkshires. And we just keep going and going on these elements. I think we have to get the education pieces right, obviously. The good news here is in every single conversation that I've had amongst legislators, 0 legislators are saying we're going to cut education. It's always, we're going to put a fence around Chapter 70. We're going to hold harmless Chapter 70 as we did in the 09, 010, and 10 kind of beginning of the Great Recession. And so that's the good news. The bad news is, as Smitty said, we are anticipating to be $6 billion short in our budget compared to estimated revenue. And so we are going to have a robust conversation, certainly as we deal with this year's budget. I think we'll probably see an interim budget first. And then I would say, I wouldn't be surprised if we take up the House Transportation Revenue Bill and use that as a vehicle for any additional, kind of looks at revenue for the short term. And then, of course, I think we do have to have a pretty big conversation into the new year. And as you mentioned, or I guess Billy did, I'm the chair of revenue. And so in the last 2 years, we've been working on what does it mean to look at our system of revenue and modernize it, simplify it, make it more fair. And so I think that might be a vehicle for us to put new proposals on the table in the new legislative term that starts in the new year. And we've even heard a couple of ideas here. It all points to what are we doing to make sure we have the infrastructure right. We didn't talk about it much today, but right at the beginning of COVID, we were at the point of pulling the trigger on the flyer, and literally within a week of COVID kind of pronouncing itself in the region, we saw Amtrak cutting back on services, announcing major losses in ridership, and it just stopped making sense to have a seasonal weekend service starting to demonstrate the importance of rail and serving as a pilot to demonstrate the demand in a season when we don't have Kripalu, we don't have Tanglewood, we don't have Jacob's Pillow, we don't have, on and on and on. And so we're working through how we use the budget money that was put aside this time to apply it for next year. And let's hope, by everything we have, that we are in some form of a normal kind of tourist-based season for next year. But anyway, and you've heard, and we've been talking about, Smitty and I, fighting like hell to make sure West East Rail is actually rail and not a bus. And, again, as we're talking through the federal piece, others on the call have already talked about our focus on making sure 4.0 federal stimulus results in something in the range of $2 to $3 billion. But the other big piece of this federal stimulus that's been talked about quite a bit, and Congressman Neal, the chair of Ways and Means, has been continuously emphasizing the fact that an infrastructure bill would have to be a part of this. The reality is, and I won't dwell on this, but the reality is this recovery is going to be filled with ups and downs as we're watching things like the unemployment insurance and the federal bonus of $600 a week just disappearing. We're going to have ups and downs, and we need to have kind of spread out assistance, and that's why I would say an infrastructure bill later this year is just critical, and we have to make sure that we've teed up the projects that we want to see, and West East Rail is certainly one of them. So, I could go on and on, but I appreciate everything you're all doing. I'm incredibly encouraged by the fact that people are still buying homes, that many of you are having a pretty good season, which, I remember talking with somebody saying that spring came early this year in February sales and the like. And so I'm encouraged to hear that at least we do see the demand, and I think it speaks to those earlier trends that I started my remarks with. So thanks again, and I look forward to working with you on a number of these things, be it the permits or others, to make sure that we're still kind of in a posture that can support your work.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you so much. And again, you've always been a wonderful partner to us as well. So we always appreciate your insight and your ability to listen to our issues and take them seriously. And also have a wonderful staff that does the same as all of you do. So appreciate it, and appreciate
even listen to Billy Keene. It's true.
I know he does have your ear, which we don't mind at all. So
we might go mountain biking later today. We'll see.
Representative Mark, if you are there and are wonderful.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. No, thank you everybody for putting this together and putting this together under the new circumstances we're all faced with. And thank you for always being, really good advocates in terms of, there's never surprise. I always know where people stand. I always know what people are interested. So it's pretty rare actually in many of the different fields that we have to deal with, to always have a heads up. So I appreciate that. And thank you for being great advocates for broadband services. That is appreciated from someone who lives in one of those towns. And I'm really pleased to see people advocating for the Green Works bill. That was actually my bill. It was my Green Bank bill, and the Speaker and Chairman Golden stole it, and they made it a little better, but I'm okay, because as long as it happens, that's all I care about. So that's really great news. The little topic I want to talk about as chair of redistricting, the census. The census is extremely important. The census has been delayed like so many other things due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's important, and it's important for all of you because it's going to affect hundreds of millions of dollars in federal and state programming. And I think those numbers are only going to go up as, you know, as more relief packages come and as we see what recovery looks like. And so getting an accurate count this year in 2020, the numbers we get this year are numbers we're going to be stuck with until 2030. And so in Berkshire County, you people know this as well as me, if not better, you know, we're in a population decline right now. And so making sure that we use our networks, we talk to people that we're in touch with, and that we make sure that every person in Berkshire County gets out there and gets counted. The new schedule for field operations for the census, they were delayed. They're beginning now. So door to door in some form is going to start happening. Some people have not received their invitation to respond. That should start happening in the near future. And then the census was supposed to be done completely by August. The new deadline to respond is going to be October 31st, so Halloween. So there's going to be opportunity to make sure that, you know, everybody in the county and everybody in the state gets counted. And I wouldn't say this on other calls, but where it's Berkshire, we actually might get lucky in that students in some of the other parts of the state might get undercounted, and that might help our numbers a little bit, which, you know, as chair of redistricting, I don't want that to happen, but as a Berkshire rep, I'm okay with it. So just another incentive to, you know, get out there and make sure that everybody's aware of this and how important it is. And so thanks again for having me and for allowing me to be here from my car.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And you should know too that the Realtor Association from the national on down has been a champion of the census and have committed that we will promote it in every opportunity that we get. Our Mass Association of Realtors, we've already put out a video that he made, Kurt Thompson, really just explaining why it's so important. And they have some great statistics because it's all about money coming back. So 100% on target. We'll do whatever we can to help as well. So thank you so much. And then Smitty, last but hardly least, our legislator that we've been visiting, I believe the longest. We've seen you through many offices at the State House, and always appreciate your willingness to show us the highlights of your job there. So,
well, thank you very much, Sandy, and I enjoy working with all of you. I like what Ann said in the beginning, that, you know, we can agree to disagree on some issues and still move forward for the greater good of the Berkshires. I'm glad Mark had mentioned the census. I think that's so important. And we have an opportunity in whatever we do or don't do with this census, we're going to own it for the next 10 years. We are still reeling in parts of South Berkshire County, in my district, for the census of 10 years ago, for what communities failed to do. We cannot fail to do it again this time around because there's too much at stake, not only on the dollars, but on educational investments and whatnot. That's number one. I'm glad Paul brought that up. On the Chapter 70, I think you have a commitment from all of us. We're going to do everything we can possibly to protect those Chapter 70 accounts for education. But I really want to emphasize the point that schools or communities that depend on state aid are the very communities that get themselves in trouble when there's a small cut in local aid. I've always approached it that let's treat local aid from the state as bonus money. When you budget at 100%, you're going to lay people off at a 5% cut. It's not the smart way to do it. It's not how you do budgeting, but communities that do that are the ones that get themselves in trouble. I've been blessed in the district, and you've all read the article in the paper. Town of Lenox, they could take a 10% cut. Yeah, it's going to be hard, but you know what? They're still going to invest in education because that's a priority for them. So we give districts and cities and towns money. We don't tell them how to spend that money. Those are local decisions. That's a city council, town selectmen, town meeting, mayor's decision. So I think it's really important to know that we're in some tough times ourselves. Nearly $6 billion we got to try to find just to pay our own bills. A cut to local aid of any type is going to be harmful, but it can't be as devastating as is being painted in the paper the last couple of weeks, number one. I'll just say that. We used to do that years ago when I was a county commissioner, and we just budgeted 100% of the previous year. We had no cushion. We had no fallback plan. Communities that do that find themselves in serious trouble. I think education is going to be paramount. It's going to solve a lot of our social ills if we make those key investments in education going forward. That being said, I'm still very bullish on the Berkshires. I think we have shown that we can weather this storm. I'm very proud to say, and the delegation has worked very closely together on this COVID situation here locally. As we sit here this morning, there's not a single patient in a Berkshire hospital with COVID-19. That is indicative of our ability on the healthcare side of things to handle this. When this all started, all the departments of public health at the state level had a surge modeling that the Berkshires were going to need 66 ventilators to handle the number of people being affected by this. Berkshire Medical Center had 25. So we all worked very closely together, and I think we found them 60. I think the most they ever used was maybe 18, not of all of which were COVID related. And I'll just say again, not a single person in the hospital today. And that's been a good trend for the last few weeks, last week, certainly. Now the restaurants are open, we're having graduations, we're attending protests, we're getting back to work. We all need to continue to take this very seriously, because I think the next 3 to 4 weeks are going to be critically important. We are seeing surges in other states that opened up too early or opened it up all at once. The administration here has been criticized for not opening fast enough. I think he's been very fair, very methodical about this process. I think the Berkshires have fared better than anybody in the Commonwealth. And keep in mind, we had the very first case of COVID-19 in the Commonwealth, and sadly, the very first death. But we've shown that our healthcare system's up to the task. Now it's time to get back to work. I think it's, as long as we're smart about it, social distancing is going to be still very important. Wearing a mask, as uncomfortable as it is, especially in the warm weather. But the next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be critical, because I think it would be more than devastating to have in July or August a revisit of this coronavirus and the governor having to clamp down again. The blessing, in my opinion, with coronavirus in the Berkshires is that we got shut down in March and April. Nobody wanted to get out of the house in March anyways. Now that we're here in June, July, August, even though we lost Tanglewood and we lost Jacob's Pillow and Mass Mocha, I think we have an opportunity to reinvent ourselves and get us back to work, start seeing some revenue coming back into the state, getting revenue back into the communities. I think we will weather this storm as long as we avoid the second wave. And the only way we can do that is, you've heard me coin the phrase, be Berkshire. Let's be smart, let's be Berkshire. We will get through this thing together. Just a word of caution, there's a neighbor of mine who plays in the symphony at Tanglewood, and I was talking to him the other day, and he's worried about next year, which really kind of shocked me. And I said, why? He said, the Vienna Orchestra, like the BSO, was concerned that how can we even get the orchestra on the stage? Never mind, fill up the shed, sit on the lawn for James Taylor on the 4th of July with 20,000 other people. How do we get the orchestra even on the stage? So what the Vienna Orchestra has done, they've limited the number of attendees on the stage. They've reduced their concerts to 1 hour, no intermission, because of the public bathroom liability. So that's why I say we got to be smart about this. We're losing this summer, unfortunately. Let's not make foolish mistakes to lose next summer. So I'll just kind of end with that, but I think you guys have raised some very good points. I think you're tremendous advocates for the Berkshires on legislative affairs, and you have my commitment, and I very feel safely saying on behalf of the delegation, as the old man on the team, I think this is a good team. We're working well together. I think we're in sync with a lot of what your priorities are, but I think we need to rally the troops, your counterparts on a statewide basis, that we try to get some of these things across the finish line and on the governor's desk before we have to adjourn, in hopes of getting reelected and trying to keep our jobs for next year.
Excellent. Yeah, and we will definitely do that, as far as Justin here too, carrying this message throughout the state, hoping our advocacy is going to help you get it across the finish line, like you said. And just to let you know, I was so proud of the association, and we talk about what the legislators have done, but the realtors pivoted extremely quickly to try to keep the market going during this and to do it safely. And it took a lot. It was not easy. It was a weekly call with many times 200 realtors doing these Zoom calls to try to go through safety, best practices, how to keep clients safe, how to clean houses. And, you know, we have a whole new way of doing business. We transitioned to doing virtual open houses within weeks of shutdown so that people didn't have to go into houses, but the economy could keep going. And we took our commitment very seriously to be essential to the economy and into people's lives. But we also see how just one individual can impact so many. And I think that we've talked about that as an association, as individuals. We know, especially realtors, have touched so many people. So we understand the responsibility to take extra care because we do come in contact with so many. And so I think that that's one of our missions going forward. So I agree that we're always selling the message about how important it is. Those small things, the wearing of the mask, the wiping things down. It's a constant reiteration that we're making. And I think that that's going to help us through. And we can see our communities are, you know, struggling and grappling with this in recent weeks. So you have our support for that as well. I would like to thank everybody. This has been great. I will admit I was a little bit nervous about this going in. I feel apparently much more comfortable just sitting in your office and, you know, bombing in and doing that, but this has worked out great. I would like to just wrap up if Eric wants to say any final words, but thank you all on our behalf. We really appreciate everything you do. I've been writing all the comments about the action items that you wish that we would take, and we're gonna follow up on that and expect an email shortly with our Market Watch report so that you can have all the details. So without further ado, thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I'll just quickly wrap up. I just want to say thank you to everyone that attended, the panelists. Great input. We're so lucky to have you guys on our team and working for us every day. So thank you again, Tom, Franz, Ann, as well as Billy. Again, thanks for all that you continue to do for the Realtors and for all the Berkshires.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.